As you all know, Jesus and his disciples traveled from place to place teaching people about God. Now, there was a very special Jewish feast which was called Passover, so Jesus and the disciples traveled to Jerusalem to worship God and take part in the special ceremonies at the temple. Mary and some of his brothers went along too. They all looked forward to a special time in Jerusalem and thought about how people would be worshiping God at the beautiful temple. So, going back in time, ever since Jesus was a young boy, he had been taught by his parents that the temple of God in Jerusalem was very an important place. Jesus practically grew up in the temple, so it was a very familiar place for him, and at the same time very special, since this was a place where people came to worship God and offer sacrifices. At the temple, everyone was supposed to be thinking and talking about God. It was a very special place for God to meet with his people. Now that Jesus was grown, he was going to enter the temple again. But Jesus became very angry at what he saw. Jesus really looks angry here, doesn't he? Do you guys know why he's so angry? Well, it's because these men at God's temple in Jerusalem are very greedy. They are trying to make a lot of money from the people who have come here to worship God. Do you guys see all those young bulls and sheep and doves? Well, the men are selling these animals right here at the temple. It did not seem as if people were there to worship God at all. Instead, the temple looked like a big market. Animals were making loud noises. Jesus heard cattle, sheep, and doves. Some people were exchanging money and trying to cheat people. The people were not thinking about God at all. Yes, it is true that God's law said that when the Israelites did something wrong, they were supposed to make an offering to God. Some Israelites owned birds and animals for themselves, but many of them didn't own any animals or birds. And others lived so far away from Jerusalem that they couldn't bring one of their animals to the temple. Look, that guy is having so much trouble with his animal. So the people came here and bought the animals and birds they needed. But these men were charging the people too much money. They were cheating the people. Besides that, they should not be selling right here in God's temple. This is what makes Jesus so angry. We get that some people live too far away to bring an animal, but making a mess in the temple and selling here? No way. That is just not right. Jesus was very sad and angry at the people were treating God and God's special place like this. Jesus is the Son of God, so the temple was his Father's house. He loved his Father and he loved his Father's house. Jesus knew he needed to do something very drastic so that everyone would understand how serious this was. So, Jesus did something that shocked everyone. Here's what he did. So he tied cords of rope together to make a whip to swing around. Then he began swinging the rope and turning over the tables that people had put in the wrong places in the temple. He shooed the birds and the animals away and caused the money that people were cheating with to fall all over the ground. Jesus said, "Get those things out of here! How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?" Before this, everyone was thinking about money and the market. Now, at last, people had the time to stop and think about what Jesus had been teaching. It was time to love and respect God at his temple just like Jesus did. However, when the Pharisees saw what Jesus did, it made them really angry. They wanted to know who in the world he thought he was. They wanted to know why Jesus thought he had the right or the authority to clear out the temple. Wow, these guys really had the guts to say that to Jesus' face. Then the Jews asked him, "What miraculous sign can you show us? Can you prove your authority to do all of this?" Jesus gave them a very strange answer. He told them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up again." The Jewish leaders said to him, "What are you even talking about? Even this temple took 46 years to be built, but you're going to raise it up in 3 days? What kind of nonsense is that? Are you crazy?" You see here, Jesus was not talking about the temple they were standing on. He was talking about the temple of his own body, Jesus' resurrection in 3 days. The Jews were thinking of the temple of the stone, but Jesus was referring to his body. Now, we know here that the Pharisees will never understand what Jesus is saying because they have this tiny little faith. After Jesus had completely cleaned out the temple, he began to teach the many people who listened to him. He healed illnesses and children praised his name. However, the chief priests and the Pharisees became angrier. They were afraid and jealous of Jesus because many people were amazed by his teaching. People were following Jesus instead of following the Pharisees. Look at them. They're just full of greed. Well, I just want you guys to know that this story really applies to our lives. It applies more than you guys can imagine. Now, we don't have a temple building today. We do have a building that we all call the church. But the real fact here is that you and I are the church. Anyone who trusts in Jesus is God's temple because God's Holy Spirit lives inside of them. So here's a question. How should we treat the temple? How did Jesus treat the temple? Yes, he made sure it was cleaned out from things that were not pure and clean, so we should do the same. Prayer is simply talking to God. You can talk to God anytime, anywhere. There is no one who can keep you from talking to God. He wants you to talk to him. Jesus wants your temple, your life, to be filled with him.
It was time for the Jewish people to celebrate Passover. Jesus, his friends, and many other people went to the city of Jerusalem. Jesus and his disciples went to the temple. The temple was supposed to be a place where people went to worship God. But Jesus saw people doing things they were not supposed to do. Some people were buying and selling animals. Other people were trading money. The temple was not a store. Jesus also saw people carrying things through the temple to get from one side of the city to the other. This was not what God wanted the temple to be used for. How could people pray and worship God with all that noise? Jesus was right to be angry.
Oi! Hey! What do you think you're doing? This is the temple!
The scriptures say my house should be called a place of worship. But with you selling animals to sacrifice, you have turned it into a den of thieves!
Hosanna! Hosanna to the Son of David!
Don't you hear what these children are saying?
Yes, I do. Don't you know what the scriptures say? Children and infants will sing praises.
That's hardly.
Hey! Gotcha! Woo-hoo-hoo.
He has to go.
But we can't arrest him in front of the people. He's too popular.
We can't arrest him in private either. We don't know where he'll be.
Then arrest him at night when he's alone. There are so many fools who follow him. It wouldn't be hard to slip one of them some money to let us know where to find him. Perfect.
What will we arrest him for?
We'll find something.
Jesus made the people in the temple leave. He was right to be angry. The people were keeping others from praying and worshiping God. Jesus came to earth to die on the cross to take away people's sin so they could be friends with God.